Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Today we're covering self-employed immigration for Canada. Of course, everyone knows the immigration programs in Canada have tightened up. No matter what program you're looking at, skilled workers, startup visa, entrepreneur programs, federal work permits, express entry, no matter where you look at, except programs for ally and family or your business, plus advantages and disadvantages. So a lot of these programs are covering what you're looking for. So we'll do a high-level overview of express entry afterwards, but we'll just go over what we have in terms of self-employed options for applicants looking to come to Canada. So the first ones is the labor market impact assessment exemptions, right? So usually a labor market impact assessment or an LMI is required when a Canadian company wants to hire a foreigner who does not have an open work permit, right? But there are significant programs that have exemptions to this for entrepreneurs. The C10 significant benefit program is for entrepreneurs and self-employed who want to start a business or maybe even buy a business in Canada, as long as it has significant cultural, social, or economic benefits. That is the benchmark that the Canadian government looks at when they want to approve your work permit. So you don't need an active business. It's not required. It can be a brand new concept. It could be a business plan. However, the officer has to be convinced that it is genuine and it will bring benefits to Canada. And it's, of course, depending on where it is, how much investment, how many people are going to be hired, or what kind of cultural, social benefits come to it. So self-employed individuals with experience and track record that they have managed or owned a business before, or they have the capacity, or maybe they're artists, athletes, or individuals with specialized skills who can enhance Canada's cultural or economic landscape. This would be significant. And people ask us, well, how much should you invest? Well, it depends. In a rural town, it could be 100, 150,000. In a large city like Toronto or Vancouver, you're looking at 400,000 plus. And if you think I'm joking, I'm not. Very simple rule of thumb. Look at the entrepreneur programs for that region, city, or province. Use that as a benchmark of what the officer can consider a significant investment, which should lead to obviously job creation or capital expenditures inside Canada. Okay, so in Toronto, sure, you don't have an entrepreneur program, but you did. So when you look at those programs, you can gauge on what would be the minimum benchmark. Okay, the C11, again, similar to the C10, right? But usually what we do is we do this more for seasonal businesses. So we usually take our clients to the C10 significant benefit. LMI exempt work permits, all you do is you register, you fund it, you put your money at risk, you've got a business plan, you apply for an employer compliance fee of issuing yourself a job offer with C10 and C11. With the C61, so that's the intercompany transfer, previously was known as C12, and these are just codes for the exemption of the LMI. You don't need permission from the government in terms of a labor market impact assessment to set up a branch, affiliate, or subsidiary in Canada, to send one of your people, and those people should have been paid at least 1 year in that headquarters overseas. So it could be an owner, entrepreneur, shareholder who's getting paid and has been actively working, or a key management executive or knowledge worker, to the branch in Canada with a work permit, usually 1 year, if that business has not operated before. And of course, Canadian operating businesses are using the intercompany transfer, the C61 exemption or 62, depending, to bring staff across the border from their other branches. However, in this case, we're looking at startup intercompany transfers, which means they don't have a presence in Canada, they're overseas, and they have to convince the officer that, hey, we're actually putting a branch there for business, to expand our business, our market, our vendors, our customers, whatever. And this should also bring significant benefit. However, the significant benefit has to be social, cultural, economic. So we're back to the C10, C11 type of thing. But if you're from a country like Korea, like US, like Mexico, like Chile, Colombia, even Peru, Europe, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth, there are bilateral agreements which allow those citizens to set up a branch here under the intercompany transfer without having to prove that there's economic benefit, because the same is allowed for Canadians going to that country. So the standards are significantly lower. Okay. However, folks, we'll keep this in mind. And by the way, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want more of these kinds of details. The key is, okay, the key is that these are all work permits. These are not direct to PR programs. And this is what many people misunderstand or are misinformed or miscalculate. Is when you have these programs, they don't actually give you a PR. You have to convince the officer you're not coming here for immigration. That is also a key standard in the C10, 11 and intercompany transfer. The officer should no way be convinced that you're doing this for the immigration or the business or whoever. It's just a work visa to come and do business, and it's going to benefit Canada in some way or another. However, if you combine it with express entry, it could, if you have the eligibility, and that's a long road ahead, and it's not going to be immediate. With an LMI exam, we'll talk about that, what is express entry, of how you could potentially, if you have the right eligibility criteria as the main applicant who's giving themselves a job offer through one of these self-employed entrepreneur or self-employed programs, potentially look at conversion, but not easy, not for everyone. Please tread carefully here. Let's look at the provincial nomination options for self-employed. Well, in addition to the federal programs, which are the C10, 11 intercompany transfer, and they're available all across the country, it doesn't matter where you go. The provincial programs, which are specific, also some of them have some self-employed programs. So most of them have the entrepreneur programs that we all know it's quite slow. There's a minimum investment, a minimum net worth, there's an expression of interest, there's an interview, there's a net worth audit, there's a work permit, run the business for 6, 12, 18, 20 months, depending on which province, and then they will audit you, and then they will issue a provincial nomination, and then you apply for PR, and then you wait for the PR by the federal government. Have I lost you so far? Yes, that's how daunting it seems. However, they do have some interesting programs, right? So Alberta has the provincial startup visa, which they call the Foreign Graduate Entrepreneur Program, which is not bad. It's kind of like a startup visa hybrid with entrepreneur provincial, and it's pretty decent. One founder, run the business, the innovation for a year based on a letter of support from one of the 2 designated organizations, a business plan, and then you got a PR after the year, like a nomination, and then you submit the PR. Manitoba has a 6-month running the business, so it's the shortest and the coldest. And of course, BC has the highest investment at the moment. Ontario shut it down last December. Okay, they may reopen it next year, who knows? Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, all do have entrepreneur programs. However, there's certain provinces which also have graduate entrepreneur programs, like the Nova Scotia program, Manitoba, and so forth, that allow graduates of a minimum academic program in that province, in one of those schools, to run their own business after they graduate and be nominated as a graduate entrepreneur after they've run the business, let's say, for a year. That's pretty interesting for mature students. So I like that. I like the Alberta Startup Visa Provincial. I like the graduate entrepreneur programs. And in terms of the general entrepreneur programs, which are the provincials, remember, they're points-based. So it's not like everyone's going to be eligible, or everyone who is eligible will have enough points. And we have different videos on our YouTube channel where we've broken down these programs into more detail, where we've talked about the points matrix and the advantages, disadvantages. They're slow, but they're secure. Okay, if you want to be hands-on in Canada, I don't know many people who do want to do that, lose all your income in your home country and, come here for 2-3 years begging for a PR. I'm sorry, but I don't know how to promote these provincial entrepreneur programs. To be honest with you, you either got to do an owner operator, express entry, PR, or you got to do startup visa. Okay, that's the reality. Going through all these programs and telling people, like, it's almost like trying to sell, I don't know, what has a bad taste. Goat cheese flavored chocolate. That's how these programs, some of them are. I can't even sell them, right? Every client that comes to me ends up saying, okay, I'm going to come there for 2 years, 3 years, and then what? Can I get my PR to the entrepreneur program? What if my child's age turns 22 or over? What if the policies change, which they do all the time? So anyways, I call these goat cheese flavored chocolates because nobody buys them. I mean, they do, but it's not as common. Let's look at the owner operator. Okay, people are saying, okay, the owner operator program, it doesn't exist anymore. Well, yes and no. Officially, it's not there. Unofficially, it's still there. You just do the LMIA and you keep the investment separate. Government looks at the LMIA in a different way, and then you do the investment. So basically, you invest in a business, you have an agreement, you put a deposit in a lawyer trust account. You're an executive with management experience, and that business can justify hiring a C-level position. So it's not a grocery store with 1 or 2 staff. This is a legitimate business who can afford paying $80,000 to $120,000 salary, and you're investing in it. And after the agreement, you put a non-refundable deposit. The agreements are in place. Executive LMI is done through that business because you want to invest in that business. And when the LMIA comes, and if you have 340 or 30 points or more in your express entry profile, that 200-point LMIA, so this is not LMI exempt that we're talking, LMIA will boost you to over 500 points, which allows you to be drawn under the federal skilled worker program. And that could potentially lead to a PR on arrival for you. Okay, so that is one program. And of course, the startup visa, where we have a lot of videos. Let's talk about the express entry system, because if you do one of those other programs we just talked about, C10, 11, intercompany transfer, so LMI exempt federal work permits, which are not direct to PR, I'm not talking about the provincial programs, just what is the express entry system and how can you combine it? Well, the express entry system is one of the skilled worker programs for direct PR. It's a points-based system, okay? It targets, you can be self-employed outside of Canada and use that experience, or you could be employed by a Canadian employer and use that experience, or you have experience from overseas, whether it's your own business or not, as long as it's documented and you were paid for it. Express entry has 3 streams: federal skilled worker, federal skilled trades program, and Canadian experience class. Canadian experience class is if you don't own the business in Canada, you've worked with them, and it's 1 year or more. Federal skilled worker program is for people who don't have Canadian work experience. And federal skilled trades program is for trades such as carpenters, construction, cooks, so forth. Okay? So now to qualify for the federal skill program, you must meet the specific criteria like language. So for people who don't have Canadian work experience, if you have IELTS 6.0 or lower, or CELPIP 7.0 or lower, or equivalent in French TEF or TCF, you won't qualify. So you need that minimum language. Plus, you need to meet 67 out of 100 points in the eligibility points to get in. If you have an offer of employment, of course, that gives you bonus points. But your education, so if you have a high school diploma and an IELTS 6 and you're 40 years old, forget it. It's not for you. If you've got 2 bachelor's degree, or a bachelor's and another type of post-secondary, a master's, and you've got an IELTS 7 or higher and you're 40 plus, you've got a chance with the 200-point LMI. Or what you do is you come through the C10, 11, or intercompany transfer that we just covered earlier in this video. You run the business, you scale it, you invest, you hire Canadians. After 1 year of paying yourself on payroll for the median wage of that position, and having enough staff to justify C-level positions. C-level means you're not managing it hands-on. Okay. then what will happen is that you could claim 200 points without an LMI after 1 year of paid work experience for yourself as the owner or executive manager. You don't have to be the owner to claim 200-point job offer from that same business that you set up under the self-employed entrepreneur C1011 or intercompany transfer, but through the express entry. So that means you need to be eligible for express entry. You need to have over 330, 40 points to actually have a chance today as of July 2024. And then justify that your business is big enough. If you have 1 or 2 or 3 staff, I don't think you'll get the 200 points. Some people do, some people don't, but it's a luck of it. If you've got 6 or more, that's when you know you'll get it. Maybe getting it and knowing you're getting it is very different. Okay. So anyways, folks, that's that. I hope that's given you some insight into how these self-employed programs work. Hi, Rusafa. How are you? Sahil and Adel. Nice to see everyone. And it is confusing, to be honest with you. And as I said, some of these programs, they are not direct to PR. They're work permits, and you got to combine them with express entry, and it's not for everyone. And as I said, sometimes trying to sell these programs is like trying to sell goat cheese flavored chocolate. Who's going to buy it? Anyways, that's my scrutiny of these programs because they're poorly designed, very poorly designed. If you have any questions, we can do it. Otherwise, we'll wrap up early today. Any questions? If anyone has any comments or questions about anything, startup visa or anything, we'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, we'd be back next week for our YouTube live. Okay? All good? Safa, Sahil, Adel. If anyone else, no objections, we'll wrap up early and we'll see everyone next week. I'll wait another 30 seconds. Okay. TLHR Dubai. Hello, sir. How are you? Nice to see you again. I know you were here last week, maybe the week before as well. Safa, any news from your IRCC, the officer, your legal rep? Sahel Malik, I heard one of your clients got an AOR in 8 months, which used come in 19 months, an SUV program. That means they have speed the process. Yeah, so we had 2 clients actually that got pretty quick acknowledgement of receipt for the permanent file number under the startup visa program. And it was quick. Yeah, one of them was 9 months, the other one similar. So one of them was through a fast track or priority designated organization. One of them wasn't. And I think there also the prejudice on nationality with the IRCC processing them. So when they get high volume countries, those are slower. But some of these countries, we have one crazy. You won't believe it. We applied in February for them. 5 months. We didn't advertise that one. So I'm pretty sure that from certain countries where you don't have high volume sort of visa applicants, they are processing those faster. So there's definitely discrimination going on in the IRCC, and it's a given, okay? But this is what's happening. So sometimes 9 months, 12 months, 15 months. I had a case, they took 19 months. This was a year. We weren't representing them. So you do have SUV applicants who are getting acknowledgement and receipt under permanent PR file number much quicker. And you do have some people who are waiting longer. So they are processing, but we have to see, we have to monitor closely. We cannot come to a conclusion for everyone that you're going to get it in 8 months, 10 months, 5 months. So not as I said, we had one that's taken 5 months. We had one that's taken 8 or 9 months, 7 months. So we have to see the trend, continue to monitor until we can come to a conclusion. Angel, good morning, or well, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Sahel, AOR means your PR approval in SUV program. No, Sahel, it's not approval. It's just acknowledgement of receipt of your PR application with your permanent file number, which means an officer will be reviewing it. So within usually 6 to 8 months, you get your PR. Okay, you don't get a PR in Canada in 9 months. You just, especially with SUV, you don't. Safa, no update on our PR file. Now it's almost 85 days. Yeah, do a GCMS, do a ATIP request on the officer notes on your case. That may push them or nudge them. Rosita, hello, Residue, and hello, Rosita. TLHR Dubai, please, do you have any business franchises? There are a lot of franchises. There's franchise brokers. There's millions of franchises. The point is that no matter what franchise you get, the officers who will give you your work permit will look at your profile, and that will be significant. How much are you investing? It doesn't, the franchise is important, but it's only 20%. The rest of it is more important. Okay, folks, I'm gonna shut down early today. Thank you for joining. Join us next week. 250K is good, TLHR Dubai, but not for the main cities. You got to go outside the main cities. Okay. And you can let us know what franchise you're looking at. We can connect you with franchise brokers, um, or and then you could potentially come in. Alan Wong, greetings, Reza. Our PR application being transferred to Montreal in June 2024. Before that was Whitehorse IRC. Is that means high risk to us? No, not necessarily, Alan Wong. They're doing load balancing right now because of all the new regulations with SUV. They're trying to process the backlog. They're trying to speed it up. They're just load balancing. So there might be multiple offices for the same case. There might be shifting from one office to the other. So don't worry. It depends on the officer specifically, whether this officer, that of course, Whitehorse it was easy. Whitehorse was easy. Montreal, I had one case. It was okay too. But again, it depends on the officer, and they may pass it on to a senior officer at any point, but it's not guaranteed. Safa says, thank you, no problem. Chanakya Batra. Hi, Reza. Thoughts on direct PR from Alberta Rural Program? Yeah, it's a great program. We've done it, and we're doing it a lot. There are the rural, which rural program? Oh, so the Alberta Rural Entrepreneur is not direct PR. It's a work permit after 1 year that could lead to PR, of course. The Rural Renewal Program is a skilled worker program that is direct PR with work permit option. There you go. Alan says, thank you, Reza. No problem. Folks, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be back next week. We can answer your questions, comments, of course, about Canadian immigration. Remember, we handle many types of immigration, including Malta, Greece, Portugal, Panama, Dubai, New Zealand, and so forth. Canada is not the only option. Janakya Batra, I meant renewal, my bad. Yeah, no problem, Janakya. Rural renewal is great. If you have a business that will sponsor you, it is a very good program. A bit slow now with the PNP in Alberta taking longer, but it's solid. After the Rural Northern Immigration Pilot, which is federal, and after the Atlantic Immigration Program, which is federal for Atlantic, the rural renewal I like a lot, to be honest with you. Probably the only PNP non-federal for skilled workers that I still have hopes for. Because when you look at all the other, like BC, Ontario, it's horrible. Nova Scotia PNP is now not really, besides healthcare and construction, doing anything. Okay. So anyways, folks, good to see everyone. We'll see you next week. I know it was a short session, but hey, what can I say? And remember, Canadian business immigration is like goat cheese flavored chocolate. Not many people want it, but you got to pick the right one so it doesn't taste so bad, right? Take care, everyone. See you next week. And remember, apply with a plan. Don't apply for the sake of just applying. You got to have a plan. You got to know the ins and outs. Hey, Nikki, how are you? You joined us late. We're leaving already. The script bored me a little bit, so that's why we're leaving early. Good to see you, Nikki. Angel, Alan Wong, Safa, of course. Good. TLHR Dubai. Good to see you, Rosita. Sahel Malik, thanks for the questions. Adele, and folks, we will see you soon. And no new updates on startup, but we're seeing more traction on the processing. But we have to also get the info from our audience members on what you're seeing in terms of your officers' reactions, responses, and everything, and PFLs, processing times, acknowledgement of receipts. But it's looking interesting. I think in the next 6 months after that, we'll actually be able to make a conclusion on what these SUV changes have implied in terms of the processing times. Not in terms of the price. We already know the price has gone up, but in terms of actual internal processing. I think by December, January, we'll actually know how has it affected existing applicants and new applicants and potentially future applicants. Okay, folks, thanks again. Appreciate it. This is the third time I'm saying bye now, but this is it. Take care, folks. Have a good one. Bye-bye.